Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Great Broadway Fans YouTube channel. I'm Luke, and today I am bringing you my very first musical review of Great Broadway Fans YouTube channel. I do apologize for the delay. My work has been a little bit hectic and crazy, but I'm finally filming this review, and it is, as I said earlier, for my all-time favorite Broadway musical, Into the Woods. I am so excited to talk about this show because I love Into the Woods. It is my all-time favorite Broadway show. I have the poster right here as I showed you for the movie. I have the original script. I have not only the original Broadway cast on DVD, but I also have the film version on DVD, and I will also show you this. This is my Into the Woods tattoo. I'm not even kidding. It's my favorite show. But prepping for this review, I honestly was asking myself the question, well, what is it about this show that is so incredible? What is it about this musical in particular that makes me love it so much? And I think it's a number of things. I think that Into the Woods succeeds so brilliantly in being a book musical because I have a theory about the actual physical script of a musical in comparison to its score. If you were to remove all of the songs from a musical and only have the book, would the story still be able to stand on its own 2 feet? And there are brilliant examples of musicals that could do this, like Cabaret or Gypsy. And I also think that Into the Woods is a great example of that. I also think that if this were to be a sung-through musical, I would be completely on board with it because the score by the great Stephen Sondheim is absolutely one of the most beautiful musical scores I've ever heard in my life. So let's start with a little background history for those of you who don't know. So Into the Woods is a stage musical. It is a musical adaptation of, I have it right here, the classic Brothers Grimm fairy tales. This is their complete fairy tale work. But this musical is a stage adaptation of the 4 classic Grimm fairy tales of Cinderella, Jack and the Beanstalk, Little Red Riding Hood, and Rapunzel, along with an original story about a childless baker and his wife who are put under a curse by the witch who lives next door. And all of the characters go into the woods to get their wishes and their heart's desires. And by the end of Act 1, everybody has gotten what they have been searching for throughout the course of the first act of the musical. The second act is completely original from the mind of Lapine and Sondheim, and it asks some very serious questions. What happens after Happily Ever After? What happens after you get what you wish for? And Into the Woods really deals with some very grown-up adult themes, such as death and parenthood, infidelity, abandonment, and it becomes this rather dark, grim musical, but it keeps its happiness level at just the right amount so that even when the bad stuff is happening to some of the characters that you've fallen in love with throughout the course of the show, you still feel a sense of happiness because fairy tales do end happily, and it's very interesting how Lapine and Sondheim walk the fine balance of having these dark moments and yet these uplifting, happy moments at the same time. And if you're not crying tears of laughter at some of the hilarious jokes that they have in this musical, then you're crying with tears of sadness and joy because it's an emotional roller coaster, to say the least, with this musical. And Into the Woods premiered actually in my hometown of San Diego, California at, where is it? Oh, here it is. The Old Globe Theater. That's why I got my Old Globe shirt on. It premiered at the Old Globe Theater in 1986 and then opened at the Martin Beck Theater on November 5th, 1987. And it got mixed reviews from critics, but audiences absolutely adored it. And if Into the Woods had opened in almost any other theatrical season, I'm pretty sure it would have and could have and should have won Best Musical. It won 3: Best Original Score for Sondheim, Best Book of a Musical for James Lapine, and Lead Actress in a Musical for Joanna Gleason. But the musical that ended up sweeping that season and winning 6, including Best Musical, was the Andrew Lloyd Webber juggernaut, Phantom of the Opera, which is still currently running after 28 years on Broadway at the Majestic, whereas Into the Woods closed its original run in 1989 after 2 years at the Martin Beck. So, after Into the Woods' Broadway premiere, there have been 3, maybe 4, successful London productions, 2 New York City revivals, including one in 2002 with John McMartin, Laura Benanti, and Vanessa Williams, as well as a Central Park Delacorte Theater revival version with Donna Murphy, Amy Adams, Jessie Mueller, and Dennis O'Hare. And then, of course, there was the Oscar and Golden Globe nominated film adaptation, which I will be reviewing next week. So, Into the Woods. What makes it so great? Well, as I already mentioned, the book is pretty spectacular. James Lapine won the Tony for Best Book, and it's perfectly legit as to why he won it, because the book is so incredible. Because the thing about fairy tales is that, aside from the Bible, fairy tales are some of the oldest and most well-known stories in world culture. Fairy tales have been adapted over and over again depending on what different culture and continent and time period it is. And fairy tales are universal. They have morals and lessons that children can take to heart. But with Into the Woods, it opens the door for more adult themes and adult morals that both the children in the audience can almost understand and the adults in the audience can very much understand. And I also think that the combination of this heartfelt book, along with the goosebump-inducing musical score by Stephen Sondheim, just makes it even more of an incredible experience in a night at the theater. I defy anyone to sit through this musical and not fall in love with at least half of the songs. Standout songs for me that I find myself loving so much about this score: the opening prologue, which is 15 minutes long and completely musicalized and introduces 80% of our characters. Absolutely incredibly well done, Sondheim. He mentions how he used, how people do in film, a cross-cutting method. So it opens with Cinderella, Jack, and the baker and his wife, and you don't spend too much time with any one individual character. You crisscross between all of these characters. I also really enjoy It Takes Two, Stay With Me, On the Steps of the Palace, Children Won't Listen, Children Will Listen reprise, Your Fault, No One Is Alone, and I am completely blanking on the song that the baker's wife sings in Act 2. I'll put the name right here because I'm completely drawing a blank. I love this musical so much, and yet I'm drawing a blank on it. My favorite characters in the show, I would probably have to give that award to, it would be a tie between the witch and the baker's wife, and Cinderella would be a close third. The witch is a very interesting character, and I ask you in the comments down below, do you think that the witch is a protagonist or an antagonist in Into the Woods? Because her motives could very easily support a case and argument for both. But in the second act, she's a completely different character. She almost flips a switch, and you suddenly realize, and I realize upon rewatching this musical over and over and over, that the witch is the one who's morally right in the second act. I won't spoil the musical for any of you who have not seen Into the Woods, although if you have not seen Into the Woods, both of these versions exist on DVD, and I would highly recommend watching it. And I bought this at Barnes & Noble. It's the full book and score and libretto. But The Witch, there's a very There's some very complicated scenes that happen between these characters in the second act, and the witch is always there, and she's the one who's pushing everybody and realizing she has a brilliant line that says, "You people are so blind," and she's absolutely true. The baker's wife is another brilliant character. There's so many this is a musical that, interestingly enough, it's an ensemble cast. It's not like main principals and then big featured ensemble. It's an ensemble cast. And this is actually a very strong female-driven musical. I think that the female characters are much stronger than the male characters. The Witch, the Baker's Wife, and Cinderella are my top three. And the Baker's Wife, it's a very interesting case because in the time period in which this musical is set, which is Renaissance, medieval, fairy tale era in which the Brothers Grimm wrote their fairy tales, obviously being a woman and a wife, she's obviously not independent, and she is supposed to be dependent on her husband, and yet the baker's wife is actually the smarter of the two, and he is dependent on her, I think more to an extent that she's dependent on him. And it's very interesting because I have seen different productions where the baker's wife has been portrayed as passive and then aggressive. And it's very obvious, which you can tell. Joanna Gleason and Emily Blunt are definitely the more aggressive baker's wives, whereas I've seen other productions, including the one with Amy Adams, where she's definitely a more passive baker's wife. Cinderella, I will touch on her. It's very interesting and noteworthy that the Brothers Grimm version does not feature a fairy godmother, so Cinderella does not have a curfew. She voluntarily leaves and is very indecisive about what she wants to do with her life. Does she go back home where she's at least safe, quote unquote, or does she go and marry the prince even though she's a complete imposter dressed in these beautiful clothes? And in the second act, Cinderella confronts her cheating husband with a brilliant line when he says, "There's a part of me that's content and has never been happier, but there's another part that continually needs more." And Cinderella brilliantly responds with, "I have on occasion wanted more. That doesn't mean I went in search of it." And I think that that is one of the most brilliant lines ever written in the history of entertainment, because when a character's confronting another character about infidelity, that is one of the most perfect lines I've ever heard. So to wrap this up and to try and to not go over 15 minutes, Into the Woods is a beautiful musical. It is perfectly connecting with its audience because fairy tales are so connecting and everybody can relate to them. The morals and the lessons that you learn. The music is absolutely chilling to listen to. The orchestrations are gorgeous. The lyrics are so intricate and detailed. The book keeps you intrigued when the songs aren't happening. The characters are well written and well developed throughout the course of the narrative. And I'm going to have to say this, I do think that Into the Woods is a better musical than Phantom of the Opera, although I do understand the reason why Phantom won Best Musical. Phantom is a dazzling spectacle with no substance, whereas Into the Woods is a non-dazzling spectacle with substance. Alright, thank you so much for watching my review for the Into the Woods musical. I really, truly, I'm sorry for the delay. Like I said, work has been crazy. My spring semester at college is going to be starting up soon, but I promise I will stick to still making videos. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. You can follow me on all four. I have 4 social media websites now. I have 2 Instagrams, 1 Twitter, and 1 Tumblr. And I will put all the links down below. And as I mentioned, next week I will be doing a full film review of the Into the Woods movie. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.